Good evening and welcome to the Candidates Forum presented by the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. My name is Angela Ryan and I am president of the Northwest Wayne County League. Tonight we have a two-part forum. We welcome the candidates running for the Livonia Public School Board, followed by the candidates running for the Wayne County Commission 9th District. We thank the City of Livonia for allowing us to use their facility for this public education event. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not support or oppose any candidate running for any office. The League does take positions on issues after careful study, so you may see our name attached to an issue that we are advocating for or opposing. Membership in the League is open to all citizens who are at least 16 years old, so if you are interested in joining this public service organization, please let us know. Membership applications are here tonight in the back of the room, or you can join by going to our website, lwvnorthwestwayne.org. The League's main mission is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. One of the ways we do that is by having forums such as this one tonight. The League is also preparing a nonpartisan voter guide, which can be found online at www.vote411.org. By typing in your voting address, you can view the races on your ballot and the candidates' responses to questions posed by the League. Print copies of the voter guide will be available in the public libraries in our community by October 9th. You can also find the link to the voter guide on our website, lwvnorthwestwayne.org. These addresses are provided on these free bookmarks that are also available in the back of the room. If you would like to ask questions of the candidates, and we certainly encourage this, please write your question on a card and hand it to one of the ushers in the aisle. Our moderator will ask as many questions as time allows. Questions should be brief, to the point, and should not include personal attacks on the candidates. We reserve the right to screen the questions for duplication and clarity. At this time, we would ask all of our audience members to please be sure their cell phones are silenced. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not of the League of Women Voters. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator, League member Roberta Young, who will provide you, the candidates, with more details about tonight's forum.
Thank you, Angela. Good evening. My name is Roberta Young, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. We're pleased you could join us tonight as we hear from the candidates running for the 3 seats on the Livonia School Board and the 9th District Wayne County Commission. Our forum will be in 2 parts. The first hour will be devoted to the school board candidates, and after a short 5-minute break to change the room around, we will seat the candidates running for Wayne County Commission seat. We ask that the audience remain seated during this time. As Angela said, our questions tonight are coming from the audience, and we have also a number of questions emailed to us in advance. Each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute opening statement, a 1-minute response to the questions, and a 2-minute closing statement. And I will rotate the order of the candidate who responds first. You drew some numbers, and we will start with Mr. Johnson, and then at the end, we'll start with Ms. Demeter. We have a league member who is our timer for the first hour, and she will hold up cards so that the candidates know when their time is up. There are 4 nonpartisan candidates running for 3 seats on the Livonia School Board. They are Colleen Burton, well, I'll go by in the order, I'll change that. They are Mark Johnson, Liz Jarvis, Colleen Burton, and Ann Denner. Let us begin with opening statements. Mr. Johnson, can you introduce yourself and give us your opening statement?
Thank you, Ms. Young. My name is Mark Johnson, and I'm running for re-election to the Board of Education. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum and affording us a platform so that we can discuss our perspectives of the issues in an open and transparent setting. I've been on the school board for 8.5 years. During that period of time, I've been elected by my colleagues 3 times as president. I have also been elected to the office of vice president as well as secretary. I certainly look forward to discussing my perspectives on the issues tonight in this forum so that we can figure out exactly where we stand. And I appreciate everyone coming tonight. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Jarvis, would you please go ahead?
Thank you. My name is Liz Jarvis, and I'm seeking re-election to the Livonia School Board. Thank you for coming tonight and for being here to learn more about the issues and how each of the candidates looks at those issues. Thank you also to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I'm running because in my past 25 years of being involved in the Livonia Public Schools, I've developed a commitment to LPS and to its families, and especially to its children. I believe it's evident that currently we have little support for public education coming from Lansing and less coming from Washington, D.C. Public education is currently under attack nationwide. This is not the time to step down from the fight. When the going gets tough, the tough don't back off. More than ever, LPS needs experienced, dedicated leaders who know this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Burton, would you please go ahead?
Good evening. My name is Colleen Burton, and I'm running for re-election to the Livonia School Board. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us this evening. I am a passionate advocate for Livonia Public Schools and for high-quality public education for all kids. I know this district well. I've been a volunteer in the district for nearly 25 years. I've served on the school board for the last 9 years and 3 years as its president. During this time, we have faced significant challenges as a district and as a state. We have had exciting opportunities and we've had important decisions to be made. It's important to know that being on the school board is not a hobby. It is important work. There are very, very important decisions to be made. Frequently, there's not a right or a wrong decision, but simply the best decision to make with the given circumstances. I believe that my extensive experience in Livonia Public Schools and my extensive training through Michigan Association of School Boards makes me a good candidate to make those decisions for our community.
Thank you. Ms. Denver.
Good evening. My name is Ann Denver, and I'm running for Livonia Public School Board. My career has been dedicated to education and learning. I became a teacher when the market was very competitive and oversaturated. When I was hired for my first classroom teaching position as a middle school math teacher, not only was I thankful, I couldn't wait to share my passion for learning with my students. I spent 5 years classroom teaching, where I gained professional experience in Michigan's public and charter school systems. When I completed my master's degree in educational technology, a new opportunity to expand my resume presented itself, and that was as a facilitator and instructional designer. I transitioned into corporate training, knowing I needed to find my way back to education, for the same reason I became a teacher in the first place, to help kids and to serve the community. Which brings me to why I'm here today and running for school board. I want to share the decade worth of learning and development knowledge that I've gained, and I'd like to collaborate with the superintendent and school board members to make decisions that support our learners.
Thank you. Before I ask the first question, I'd like to mention that our timer this evening is Karen Moon Dupre. So she's the one to watch. I'll ask the questions, but when you answer, look in her direction because that's where the camera is, and that's very important for you. We'll start with Mr. Johnson, the first question. What can be done to eliminate the need today for teachers to buy their own classroom supplies?
Well, unfortunately, that goes back to our funding issues. Unfortunately, over the last number of years, we have been faced with declining enrollment and reduced funding from the state. Now, sometimes you'll hear that there's more money going into education than ever before. And if you take that statement and end it right there, that's an accurate statement. Unfortunately, costs are rising, particularly in the area of our teachers' pensions. Based on that, we don't get the money that comes in. It's not finding its way into the schoolrooms themselves. Therefore, we have to at least do something to help with our funding from the state.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis, go ahead.
Thank you. One way to help stop our teachers being required to buy their own school supplies would be to keep track of the dollars that come into and out of the school aid fund in Lansing. While it's true that it is one of the largest money pots that we have in Lansing, one of the two big ones, it's also true that that particular fund has been raided over the past several years. Dollars that were intended to go to K through 12 classrooms are now finding their way into cyber schools, charter schools, universities, and other non-K through 12 situations. If we can pressure our representatives and senators in Lansing to monitor that fund carefully and to use it for the purpose it was intended, there would be enough money coming into our classrooms so the teachers would not have to sacrifice.
Ms. Berg.
State funding has been rather a debacle for public schools over the last 8 years, beginning with Governor Jennifer Granholm in October, about 8 years ago, which was well into our school year. We faced a several $million-dollar cut that was unannounced. That was supposed to be a one-time cut to the school aid fund to help out the general fund in the state of Michigan, and unfortunately, it's become rather a regular occurrence. In addition, more money on the whole is going into education, but around that same time, colleges and universities were allowed to take a large chunk of that pie. In addition, healthcare costs have risen and retirement costs have risen. So very few of those extra dollars are going into the classroom. We are actually still behind from where we were 8 years ago, and yet our costs continue to go up. Until the adequacy study that has been commissioned, that was bipartisan by the state of Michigan, until that is taken seriously, and funding on the whole is taken seriously in the state of Michigan, we're going to continue to have problems such as this.
Thank you.
I just would first like to say that I'm all too familiar with the problem, having spent many hours cutting box tops in my classroom to get paper and pencils for my students. I would say it's about being creative with the resources that you have, and also as a representative of Livonia Public Schools, pressuring those to get more funding. Really, the resources need to be there for students and for teachers. Teachers shouldn't be having to take that out of their pockets, and I've realized that that's happening quite frequently. So I would like to support and also pressure those to take more consideration into funding our schools, because education is essential.
Thank you. The next question is for Ms. Jarvis. Do you support complete open enrollment where children living in any city in the metro area can enroll in the Livonia Public School District? Why and why not?
Well, complete open enrollment also sounds like unlimited school of choice. In Livonia Public Schools, we have a limited school of choice program, and that program can be used as a tool not only to increase enrollment, but also to help fill our classrooms and to strategically divide classrooms so that we can monitor the teacher-to-student ratio. I do not support unlimited school of choice or unlimited open enrollment. I think throwing the doors open to the public is not the answer.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
I am not in favor of open enrollment or unlimited schools of choice. I am in favor of the very, very limited program that Livonia Public Schools addresses on a year-by-year basis. What has been happening over the last few years, which I have been in support of, is bringing a small number of students into the district on a lottery basis. That's been approximately 80 students have come into the district to be spread over 23 schools over this past year. That brings in about $500,000 to Livonia Public Schools, and what that does is it allows us to continue with the programs that we have and the teacher ratios that we have. It eliminates some split classes. and it allows us to continue the services for our students while not taking away services on the whole. I'm absolutely opposed to an open or unlimited schools of choice because I believe that would entirely change the tone of our schools, and that would not be fair to the taxpayers of our school district who would pay to have the quality schools that we have in Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
I would agree that I do not support open enrollment simply because of tax dollars that go into the district. It becomes very messy when you bring in other students from other districts, and would really like to focus on supporting the students in our district and then being strategic about opening up the doors for others.
Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Burton for the next one. Do you,
Excuse me, I didn't have.
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead.
I probably don't have anything really important to say. However, I am not in favor of open enrollment. We do have, on a number of levels, schools of choice. We have wonderful programs in this district. We look at our IB program at Franklin High School. We look at our global education program at Stevenson High School. We look at our MSc program at Churchill High School. So we do have open enrollment to a certain extent, but it is very limited. We control how many students come into those programs. We make sure that Livonia students get the first seats, and if there are any seats available after that, then we will take students at schools of choice. But I don't think it behooves our district to just open up our doors to allow everyone in. I think that, unfortunately, that promotes some cherry picking among schools.
Thank you. The gifts to staff policy in other local districts is defined as a, quote, undesirable practice. The Livonia Public School gifts to staff policy supports occasional gifts, favors, or invitations from students, parents, or those interested in doing business with Livonia Public Schools. What are your views on Livonia Public School employees accepting gifts, favors, and invitations?
I believe that the school policy is pretty clear and pretty strict on the types of gifts that can be accepted, and they are the policy is designed so that a Christmas gift or an end-of-the-year gift from a student to a teacher, as is common especially in elementary schools, if they're going to give a craft item or a small item. I believe the dollar value was $25 or less, if I'm not mistaken, on that gift. I believe that is realistic, and I'm glad that we have a policy, because it's going to happen where families and students give a small token gift to their teacher. As long as we have a policy on it, which we do, and that it is strict, it is enforced, I believe that is the appropriate way to handle it. I think that not having a policy or saying that we're not going to allow it ever is simply sticking your head in the sand and not being realistic with the problem. Or actually, problem's not even quite the right word, with the situation. I don't believe it's a problem for a student or a family to give a small token gift to their teacher at the holiday time or at the end of the year.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
I think that as a former teacher, you do receive gifts from students, and it is that moment where you feel appreciated and you feel that you've made a difference in that child's life if they took the time out of their day to ask their parents either to get you a gift or they got one themselves. I think if there's a policy on it that states that it's within the range of $25, then that makes sense, and I would agree with the policy. I wouldn't say that going above and beyond that would make sense.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
We have a policy in place for a reason. I don't have a problem with some small tokens, but we don't want to get into a situation where these gifts escalate. I'm a trial lawyer. Under our code of ethics, I have to eliminate even the appearance of impropriety. And I think if you had didn't have a policy, or a policy that allowed for a gift that was a little too high, you get into an appearance of impropriety. Is that parent or that student trying to favor a particular teacher or for a particular grade? So I think the policy is there for a reason. I fully support it.
Thank you. The next question. Oh, Ms. Jarvis, I am sorry.
Thank you. Giving gifts to teachers at Christmas time or at the end of the year is appropriate and a lovely gesture. It should be optional. There are many families in our district who can't afford to give a gift to a teacher, no matter how much they appreciate that teacher's effort. And a gift can be misinterpreted. It can be considered excessive in some cases. And in some cases, families may feel pressured to give a gift because some other child was giving a gift to the teacher. It's a lovely gesture, but it shouldn't be anything more than that. It should not be something that makes anyone, either the teacher or any student in the classroom, feel uncomfortable.
Thank you. We'll start the next one with Ms. Demeter. Do you support charter schools of any kind? Why or why not?
I do not support charter schools. I used to work at a charter school, and the reason being is that I don't believe in taking educational resources and putting them and lining someone's pockets with them or putting it into someone's profit or business profit. I believe that all resources should go towards students and our educators.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. I think there is a time and a place for charter schools, but we have to understand that where's the funding coming from? Charter schools are for-profit organizations. We have public education that is supported by our tax dollars. Unfortunately, not all students are on an equal footing. Unfortunately, charter schools do not have to take every student that walks in the door, as we do in public education. We have tremendous programs for our students at all levels. So the problem that I see is really the funding for them. They are for-profit. The public schools are paid for through state funds. As long as we were able to keep them separate, I'm sure there's a time and a place for them.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. The question shouldn't be whether I support charter schools. Charter schools exist, and as Mr. Johnson said, there's a place for them. The question should be whether our tax dollars should support charter schools. Charter schools boast that they are public schools, and they claim that because they're supported by tax dollars. So if tax dollars is what defines a public school, to me that seems backwards. It should be, do tax dollars go to a school that claims to be public? And don't use those tax dollars in the definition. Our Constitution is quite clear about that tax dollars should not go directly nor indirectly to support any private school. So I would think that given the proliferation of charter schools in Michigan, that's a symptom of a bigger issue, and the issue is how can we improve public ed so that we don't need to have so many other organizations springing up and staking a claim in our school aid fund dollars.
Thank you. Ms. Bird?
I think there's an appropriate place for public school, private school, and charter schools. The problem I have is that tax dollars should go to fund public school. I have no problem with charter schools or private schools, but they should not be funded with tax dollars. The reason is that those tax dollars are then, those charter schools rather, are not held accountable to answer to anyone as far as where that money goes. Most of them are for-profit. Many of them are headquartered out of state, which means our Michigan tax dollars are going out of the state of Michigan to line someone else's pockets. That's what I have a problem with.
Thank you very much. We'll start the next question with Mr. Johnson. Estimates show that 30% of public school revenues are spent on teachers' pensions. Do you think that should be adjusted up, down, or remain as it is?
That's a difficult question because what you're really talking about is the defined benefit plans that have been ongoing for many, many years. And as our teachers get more experience, the cost goes up for those programs. It's hard to say whether or not it should or shouldn't go up. We've now switched, and there are programs now that are more in line with a 401k. We spend approximately 90% of our budget in labor costs, regardless of whether it's pensions, salaries, other types of benefits. The teachers that have been here for those many years are entitled to the benefits that they were afforded when they first started. So it's difficult to say whether it should go up or down.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Johnson. This is a difficult question because those are numbers that we don't set. Those numbers come either from Lansing or their negotiated rates. What I would like to see is to see the amount come in that we can afford to pay teachers more, to pay them what they're worth, without sacrificing their retirement plans, their health options, or any other dollar amount that they receive. I think that it's time to start treating our teachers with respect and to treat them like the professionals they are. So they're more than deserving of these type of plans, retirement plans and health plans and so on, just like any other professional. Let's pay them the money they're worth so that the dollars goes up and then the percentage won't look so bad. It won't be so drastic.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I certainly can. Estimates show that 30% of public school revenues are spent on teacher pensions. Do you think that should be adjusted up, down, or remain as it is?
It largely is a symptom of age groups that are reversed, and we're seeing that not only in the education world, but just in the population in general. We have more folks that are senior citizens and that are in the retirement ages of their life than there are the younger folks who are supporting them. Until that works its way out, that's one significant part of the problem. Public education has come to address some of this with alternative health care plans for new teachers that are coming in, but it's going to take some time before it works its way through the whole system. It's a significant problem. I do appreciate the fact that the state of Michigan helps us out to somewhat of a degree with some of those costs. However, the problem I do have with it is that when the state of Michigan is writing the Livonia Public Schools, for example, a check for X number of $1 million, they'll write the check to Livonia Public Schools for X number of $1 million, and that very day we have to write a check back in that amount. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Estimates show that 30% of public school revenues are spent on teacher pensions. Excuse me. Do you think that should be adjusted up, down, or remain as it is?
Thank you. I would say that it's a pretty hard question to answer, and I think it's a larger question than just for the Livonia Public School Board. I think across the nation we need to support our teachers and make sure that they are set up for the benefits that they need to do the job and also for when they are done serving. So for me to say go up, stay the same, or go down, I would definitely need more information before I can answer that question clearly.
Thank you. Let's see. We'll start the next question with Ms. Jarvis. What is your opinion of Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos's proposal and program of a, quote, voucher school program? Be detailed in your comments.
First and foremost, we're looking at a national question rather than a local question, so let that be the caveat. I think that what Ms. DeVos is trying to do is to try and use tax dollars to pay for private education. Regardless of how she sees that, we know that in Michigan that goes against our state constitution. I believe that public dollars should go to public education. And I don't think that convoluting the way the law is written or trying to create a voucher or an alternate system is a healthy way to approach this very clearly written law. I think it's kind of like trying to sneak in the back door. And I would like to see that Mrs. DeVos take a healthy look at where tax dollars need to go. The people have already spoken about this many times, and it's like a child asking for a cookie again and again and again. Eventually, Mom will say yes. Well, we won't.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
I am opposed to the use of vouchers as they have been proposed right now, because that is the use of tax dollars to go for private education or charter school education. Private education is, using tax dollars for that purpose would be opposed. And I think that most folks, when they think about it, are glad that it is not allowable, because that would be tax dollars supporting largely religious organizations, some of which you may believe in their stance, and some that you may be very, very opposed to, but tax dollars regardless would be going for those. Charter schools, as we mentioned earlier, a good chunk of that money is going to line private corporations' pockets, and that is not the best use of Michigan tax dollars. Michigan tax dollars should be used to educate Michigan children, all of them, who choose to go to Michigan's public schools.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
I would say that I'm opposed because of my previous answers before as well. The taxpayer money should be going, if it's public taxpayer money, it should be going to public education. So my stand on the voucher system would be that I'm against it.
Thank you. The next question.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson.
I sort of feel like the odd man out. I do not agree with the voucher system for the reasons that my colleagues have already set forth. This is a backdoor attempt to use tax dollars to support other forms of education. There are tax dollars that support public education, and now we're looking at perhaps lining the pockets of, as Mrs. Burton said, these non-profit schools. I don't think it's the correct way to do it. I think that money should go to public education, and I think if we were to go back to taking that money that was taken out of the school aid fund years ago, put that back in, then I think we'd have better support for our public education, but I'm certainly not in favor of vouchers.
Thank you very much. My apology, Mr. Johnson.
It's okay.
Ms. Burton, we'll start with you.
Yes.
This is another money question.
Okay.
Please comment on the importance of the $200 million bond millage that was approved by Livonia's generous voters a few years ago in support of our public schools. What is the money being spent on?
One of my favorite topics. Thank you to our Livonia community for passing what we refer to as the bond. It's a $195 million bond, and it's going to three main purposes, which is to improve technology in our school district, improve security in our school district, and building upgrades in our school district. It is nearly in completion. We are in the 5th year of a 5-year rollout plan. Drive by any one of our Livonia Public Schools and you can't help but smile. The outside, the exterior is spruced up, looks fabulous. New heating, new windows, new flooring. It's basically the equivalent of your house never having a major upgrade in 50 or 60 years, and then you get one. There are not chandeliers, but believe me, the buildings look phenomenal. There's new updated furniture. There's new technology, so we are competitive with neighboring school districts. Each one of our high schools has a brand new auditorium that's used for, I just hit stop. I could go on all day. Sorry, but they're fabulous. Thank you to the community.
Ms. Hammond.
So I attended a board meeting the other day where they presented some of the progress. So it was great to see, not only from my experience of driving by the schools, but also seeing in the schools the progress that's been made, the updates. It's great to see that some schools that needed that infrastructure improvement got what they needed, and the students are getting additional resources as well. And it's the Performing Arts Center actually had a great opening on Monday, so that's also very exciting, very state-of-the-art. And it's great to see the improvements that have gone into the school because of that bond.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, and just a technical correction, it was $195 million. What's $5 million in expense? It's unfortunate we only have a minute, because if you just walk through our schools and see the changes, it's phenomenal. I went to Riley Junior High School, I won't tell you what year, but when I went through there before we implemented the bond, we started doing the construction, they still had the same PA system and the same tile on the floor that was there when I was there. You just go through our schools now, they are beautiful. In addition to the items that Mrs. Burton has already gone through, we also have replaced about half of our buses. In those buses, we have implemented significant safety measures for our students. It's just been tremendous, and I invite anyone to go through one of our schools, make an appointment, and go in there and just see how beautiful they are. And this is all thankful to the community for passing that bond.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
I too am saddened that I only have a minute because we could go on about this. Thank you to our community for passing the bond. $195 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you have a lot of schools to update, buildings that haven't really been updated in the last 50 years or so, it goes pretty fast. I invite everyone in the community to call their local principal and schedule a tour, because going and seeing for yourself is better than hearing me talk about it. The updates are incredible. One thing it has done is it's changed the way our teachers teach the children. They can incorporate technology now that didn't exist in the classroom 5 or 10 years ago. It's also affecting our budget in very positive ways because it shifts what we need to focus our spending on. Some of the changes and additions to our buildings, some of the modifications have been handled through those renovations rather than through other funding. But most importantly, it makes our community attractive and stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now start with Ms. Demeter. Do you support teachers carrying concealed guns in schools to protect students from a mass shooting? Why or why not?
I absolutely do not support guns being in schools and teachers carrying guns. I think if we have money to put into the school for resources, those resources should be spent on education. I think there's other ways to prevent things like mass shootings in terms of, as a nation, fixing those problems. One, selling semi-automatic weapons and military-grade weapons to our citizens is something that, if we stop doing that, could prevent mass shootings from happening. So for me, it's looking at not reacting to that problem, but instead finding a solution for our nation.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. This is an issue that, first of all, we have to understand that our schools have significant safety issues already built into them. Number one, if you go to any of our schools, and when we were working on implementing the bond, we have now secure vestibules in all of our schools. There are significant other safety measures that are involved. The problem with simply giving a teacher a concealed weapon is, what training have they had? Have they ever had a weapon? Do they feel comfortable carrying the weapon? These are all questions that are on an individual basis. However, I don't think it's appropriate at this point to arm our teachers with concealed weapons.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. The majority of our teachers have already expressed that they do not want to carry concealed weapons in school. I listen to our teachers. Therefore, I am opposed to having our teachers carry concealed weapons. If we had funding for concealed weapons, then we would have funding for supplies, and we would have funding for mental health professionals in the schools, and we would have funding for literacy programs and so many other things that we need much more than we need concealed weapons in the schools. As Mr. Johnson has already said, our bond dollars have already gone to improving security and safety within our schools. And we will continue to monitor those programs and those security measures. At this point in time, I do not support arming teachers with concealed weapons.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
I do not support our teachers carrying weapons. I support having a multifaceted security system that hopefully will thwart anything before it gets to the point of our teacher having to have a weapon. There is a multifaceted security plan in Livonia Public Schools that exists already. Some of it is publicly known, and like any good security plan, some of it is very intentionally not publicly known. You don't want the bad guys to know what all the stops are. However, we have a head of security who is a former police officer. We have blue line security and police officers that are in every one of our high schools. One of the good things that goes on there is not simply stopping a problem in its tracks, but rather developing relationships with the students so that we find out what's kind of brewing, and most problems are stopped before they ever happen. We have the bond, as has been stated, is phenomenal, secure vestibules in every one of our school buildings. Technology has been improving. And I'm told I need to stop. Sorry, needs more than a minute.
Next question will be to Mr. Johnson. Is it okay with you if children don't say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Boy, that's a very interesting question. I think every child has the right to express their own feelings. From my personal standpoint, a lot of people have fought and died for that flag. Personally, I would stand for it, but I'm not going. That's what we have a constitution for. That's why we have the right to free speech. The people that have fought and died for that flag also fought and died for the right of people not to stand for the pledge. Personally, I would stand, but I would not stand in the way of some other individual's right to not do it.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. I believe that the United States Supreme Court has already determined that we have a right to not stand or to not say the pledge. I'm not going to cross the Supreme Court. If a child feels that they do not want to stand or not want to recite the pledge, I would certainly allow them that right. I would also turn it into a teaching moment so that the rest of the class is aware of the situation and understands the background behind it and understands the rights and the freedoms afforded to everyone in this country by so many people who have fought and died for those rights and freedoms.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
While I would like to see every child and every adult, frankly, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and be respectful during so, it's not within my right to tell someone else that they must, as sad as that makes me. We have taught our own children to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, how to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think that what we really should be doing is spending some time in our elementary and middle and high schools talking about what exactly that pledge means. I was a substitute teacher in one of our Livonia Public Schools several years back in a music class and took the opportunity to spend that hour discussing what the Star-Spangled Banner and all the lyrics mean specifically, what was happening, what they mean, and why. And then we sang it together at the end. That's taking that opportunity to teach kids what it means and why it's important to some people. I can't force it to be important to everybody, but I sure will encourage folks to understand what it's for and why it's there and why it's so important. What is important if they choose not to do it is to not disrupt others who are saying the pledge.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
I think as a country we support everyone making the decisions and doing what they would like to do. So if students decide that they would not like to say the Pledge of Allegiance, then it's not something you can stop them from. But I do think that there are teaching moments in both sides of that. Showing, I think a big part of education is showing kids the value of why we're doing things, why did they learn certain things, why do we do the Pledge of Allegiance. So explaining that to students and also why we have the right to not say the Pledge of Allegiance. It's teaching moments on both sides and explaining to students why we do things.
Thank you. We'll start the next question with Ms. Jarvis. The Livonia Public School Board of Education claims only 3 responsibilities: setting policies, setting long-term goals, hiring the superintendent. Do you believe the Board of Education has an oversight of responsibility for major items like the multi-million-dollar construction bond?
The role of the Board of Education in this state has been set by the state. It's part of state law. It's not really up to me to change what the state has already determined. However, within our own swim lanes, we have a lot of leeway. You can stay in your swim lane and choose to use a different stroke. So yes, I would like to to suggest that even though we have three main roles, which are to hire and evaluate the superintendent, to plan for the future of the district and to create policy that helps to make that plan a reality, and to approve the budget, that your question falls under item number 3, which is approving the budget. We don't create the budget, but we do hope that that budget falls into alignment with the plans and the policies of the district.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
It is correct that the 3 roles of the school board are to set policy, to hire and evaluate the superintendent, and to set the long-term goals of the district and make sure the budget is aligned to those goals. We do approve the budget. Also, at any school board meeting that's a voting meeting, you'll see us also reviewing and approving any purchase that is $50,000 or greater. So in that, absolutely, the Board of Education approves all of those large ticket items. I am a fierce advocate of the Board of Education staying within their responsibilities. If the teachers tried to do the custodian's job and they tried to do the cook's job and they tried to do the principal's job and the principal tried to do the Board of Education's job, it would be chaos. The Board of Education needs to stay within their role, which is to write policy, and in that I am enormously proud of the fact that this board that I'm sitting on currently wrote the Code of Ethics that has been given credit. I'll just talk about it later. Get this down.
Do you mind repeating the question for me?
The Livonia Public School Board of Education claims only 3 responsibilities: setting policies, setting long-term goals, and hiring a superintendent. Do you believe a Board of Education has an oversight responsibility for a major item like a multi-million-dollar construction bond?
Thank you. I believe that the board has some oversight there with approving, like some of the other candidates have mentioned. I would say that, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. With the Board of Education and supporting the superintendent, I think that the superintendent should be setting those policies, and we're holding the superintendent accountable for following those policies, for aligning with us on those policies, and for approving budget. I would say that there's a reason why we have the school board, there's a reason why we have administrators in schools. It takes a lot to educate children, and we have to separate those roles so that we can hold each other accountable and then also make the best decisions for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. This is one of the perhaps most misunderstood parts of school boards. And your question was, we claim only 3 responsibilities. As Mrs. Jarvis has said, that's not what we claim, that's what the state dictates to us. In terms of oversight, we have 1 employee, that is our superintendent, and we have a great one. But if there are things that are going wrong within the district, we hold the superintendent accountable for those. That's our oversight. But when you look at the $195 million bond that we just administered, those expenditures come to us for our approval as they go forward. So there is oversight, particularly as it relates to the bond, but we do our oversight through our superintendent.
Thank you. We'll start the next question with Ms. Burke. Do you support mandatory random drug testing of students at the Livonia Public Schools? Some private Catholic schools do have this policy. And these questions are from the audience, not the league.
Can you repeat the question? So
Yes.
I understand exactly.
Do you support mandatory random drug testing of students at the Livonia Public Schools? Some private Catholic schools do have this policy.
I cannot speak to what any private institution does. However, I am opposed to randomly, mandatorily testing our students. If our students have shown no inkling, no reason to me to be causing any problem, I do not believe that our school district has a right to impose mandatory drug testing on them.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
So I do believe as a school district, you are accountable to students to make sure that they are living healthy lives and not making poor choices, but I think going to the degree of mandatory randomized drug testing I would not agree with that.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
No, I'm not in favor of random drug tests. I think the difference that you're talking about in private schools, they march to a different drummer, and by that I mean they don't have the same set of rules that we have as a public school. I do not favor invading our students' rights. Just because they come to school, we don't know, we can't control what they do outside of school. We try and influence them by providing them with information, education, but we can't dictate to them what they do out of school. And I think mandatory drug testing like that is inappropriate for our students.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll start the next one with Ms. Demeter. 2 years ago, the board voted to close 2 elementary schools. Looking back, do you agree with this decision and why? And if this needs to be done again, what would you change or improve regarding the process?
So 2 years ago, I was not in the Livonia Public School District. I was actually living in Dearborn Heights and I'm not familiar with the process that happened with closing of schools, but I could speak to in the future handling that. I think there's a partnership that needs to happen between the community, the educators of the school, the superintendent. To make a decision like that, it's a very tough decision to make. I can't imagine having to make that decision because you are influencing or impacting so many lives when you make that decision. But there's most likely a sound reason why that happened. I would have to look into the exact reason why, though.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you. First of all, you have to understand how that all came about. As we indicated, this board was overseeing the implementation of the bond, and we got to a point where we were wondering whether or not putting more money into certain schools that, based on studies, had indicated may have to close in a couple of years was prudent and a proper use of those bond dollars. We therefore hired a firm to do not only a utilization study of our buildings, but also our student population and where those trends were going. This was a year-long process or more to determine whether or not we were utilizing our buildings appropriately. Through those studies, it was determined that we were not utilizing the buildings appropriately. And therefore, we had to make a tough decision as to which schools we could close in order to look to the future. And hopefully we won't have to do that, but one never knows.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. I did not support the closing of the 2 schools 2 years ago for reasons that I made clear at that time. However, as they were closed, the question addresses the process and how it was handled. And I feel that it was handled with as much respect, consideration, research, communication, and transparency as possible. It wasn't an easy thing to do. I remember when my children's school was closed. As a parent, it was devastating, and it was no less devastating for the families 2 years ago. However, the district and the administration worked tirelessly to make it as smooth and as painless as possible, accommodating everyone, every need, every family to the best of our ability. At this point in time, we don't see a need to close schools in the foreseeable future. That could change at the drop of a hat.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
The closure of the schools was something that I voted on. It was, without a doubt, the most difficult decision that I have had to make on the school board. But on the school board, we are charged with looking out for the good of the entire district. it became apparent that we had buildings, and it was not an overnight surprise. We knew for some time this was coming because we have a slowly declining population in Livonia. But we studied it at great detail. There's a group of parents, educators, administrators, board members, studied this for several months, looking at all the possible scenarios. And bottom line, it came down to we could either keep those extra 2 buildings open and pay for bricks and shingles and windows, or we could close the buildings and put those dollars inside of the classrooms. As difficult of a decision as that was, and believe me, every member that had to vote on that spent many sleepless nights worrying about it, I believe the right decision was made. On top of that, the district went overboard in communication, and which is why it was as successful as a transition as I believe that it has been.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I responded.
You responded already.
Okay, sorry.
I'm
Yep.
sorry. Let's see. Mr. Johnson. Senator Colbeck recently proposed changing language in history books, eliminating references to the KKK and Roe v. Wade, to name a few. He would also take the word democratic out of a reference to the country's democratic values. Do you agree with these changes? Why or why not?
I don't agree with those changes. What you're trying to do is change history. History is history. Quite honestly, I think some of our history books, at least from what I've seen, don't go far enough. They eliminate some of the things that are most important in our history. I don't think you want to eliminate Roe v. Wade. That was a tremendous decision. Whether you like it or not, it's still part of history. I don't think, as long as the history books accurately depict what has happened in the past, I don't see a reason to change them. I totally disagree with Senator Colbeck on that.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Johnson. History is history. Rewriting history doesn't change the history. It just changes what people learn going forward. I'd rather have our students learn what actually happened than what Senator Colbeck wishes had happened. I also encourage Senator Colbeck to learn the difference between a capital D and a lowercase d, the democratic values that he wishes to remove our lowercase d, the very democratic values that are the basis of our Constitution. I think it's essential that they stay in the history books.
Thank you. Ms. Burton?
There are parts of our history or any country's history that I'm wildly proud of, and some that I wish had never happened or are not happening at this day. However, it's a fact. It happened. We need to teach our children what history is, and one of the best values of history is to learn from it so that we either repeat what was really good or don't do again and make sure it doesn't happen again what was really bad. That's the value of history. That's the whole point of teaching our children history, right from early ages before they even come into school. We teach our family history, our family traditions, and so forth on, all the way through our education. Hopefully as adults we're still learning history, but we can't simply erase the parts we don't like. It's just not reality.
Thank you. Ms. Demeter?
I would agree that we can't just erase history. We need to have students understand where we've come from as a country. What journeys have we been on? What have we learned? What things do we not want to repeat? And I think that's pretty essential to understand. Even when our country makes mistakes and when people make bad decisions, we can still learn something from it. But I don't think it should be removed at all as a reference, because that is history. You can't change what happened. And we as a country need to understand the struggles that we've been through to get where we are, so that our students understand what having a free public education actually means and how much value that should be to them.
Thank you. At this point, I'm afraid there's no time for more questions. It flew by. It's 8 o'clock. So we're going to start the final 2-minute roundup with Ms. Demeter to Mr. Johnson. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think my background makes it obvious that I've always been passionate about education, and I have a wide range of experience tutoring, classroom and substitute teaching, and mentoring students. Due to my experience, I have a good understanding of how people learn and retain information. My goal is to enhance what's currently happening in LPS, since the shared vision of the district really aligns with my viewpoints. The annual education report for this past school year has some traditional methods like science fairs and formative assessments. Then there are a few gems in there like the Leader in Me at Randolph and Emerson. I'd like to enhance these initiatives with project-based learning, 9 moments of learning, student work programs, and emotional intelligence, all the things that I have learned in my career in learning and development. So my vision for the school board is a school board that supports educators, supports learners, the modern learner, giving them learning experiences that support the education of the whole child. I envision teachers becoming guides for students and leading them down a path of how education can lead them to a successful life and also contribute to society. I'd also like to use that annual education report to write instructionally sound objectives using Bloom's taxonomy, which is how teachers can assess students in the classroom. If we set them up for success with those objectives, then those cognitive goals for students, then teachers will be set up for more success to teach those students and assess them on what those cognitive goals are. I really want what's best for the community and want to collaborate with the educators and the superintendent and current school board members. So if I get the opportunity to join the school board, I'd love to bring all of my knowledge to the board and share those experiences and help make good, sound decisions that make sense for our learners.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bird.
I am obviously passionate about Livonia Public Schools and about high-quality public education. I'm also passionate about the role of the Board of Education, and I think it's paramount to understand what job it is we are trying to have here, trying to get a seat on. The role of the Board of Education is not the same as the role of a teacher. The role of the Board of Education is to put the resources into the teacher's hands so that they can do what they do best. It is to write policy for the district. It is to hire and evaluate our superintendent, and it is to set long-term goals for our district and align that budget to those goals so that they are achievable. To that end, I'm very proud of the Code of Ethics that was written by this board, Sitting Board of Education, that has been cited as exemplary by our Accreditation Association. We reviewed every one of our 600 pages of policy and brought them up to date so that they are current, relevant, and are within the confines of the law. We have, in the last few years, had a transition of superintendent, and we have Mrs. Andrea Oquist, who I think is absolutely phenomenal, and I hear her accolades all over the district. This board didn't just cherry pick Mrs. Oquist. We went through a very lengthy, very serious process to get Mrs. Oquist into this position, and I don't regret 1 minute of the time we spent doing so. As far as our long-term goals go, I am very, very proud of the work that I've done on this board, advocating to our community for the need for the bond. It will benefit our community for the next 30 years. I've spent 9 years on this school board, 3 of them as president of the board. I've spent countless hours in the Michigan Association of School Board classes. I think my combination of time in Livonia Public Schools School District with my extensive training makes me a very appropriate candidate to make the decisions that affect the students, the staff, and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jarvis.
Thank you. Over the past 4 years in my time on the Livonia School Board, I have worked hard to maintain the reputation and the programs of Livonia Public Schools. I have a demonstrated commitment to this district. I have been sitting on not only the school board, but also on the district school improvement team, past president of the Livonia PTSA Council, current state board member of the Michigan PTA, a member of the Livonia Public Schools Education Foundation Board. I support this district and I'm familiar with how it works. I would not presume to tell the teachers how to teach, nor to tell the principals how to run their buildings. But I'm very happy to be the #1 cheerleader for this district, to hold hands with children who are standing up in their school, running in their fun runs, to supporting teachers in their drive to improve their outcomes for their children. We are at a crux in public education, and we need people in this position who not only know the community and have experience in the community, but also know our schools with experience in those schools and who know this job. And that's why I am running and hope for your vote to re-elect me to the school board. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum, and particularly Ms. Young, you've been very professional in moderating this evening. We all appreciate that. Someone asked me not long ago, why in the world do you want to be on the school board where there's always a target on your back? And I started to think, I've been in this community most of my life. I am a product of the Livonia Public School Systems, having graduated from Bentley High School. I've also spent a lot of time on this side of Farmington Road. I have been a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission for the past 30 years. For the last 14 years, I've been the chair of that commission. So I have to ask myself, am I really passionate about what goes on in the city and the school district, or am I just a glutton for punishment? During the period of time that I've been on the board, we have reached many milestones. During my presidency, one of the things that I wanted to accomplish was to make this board an honor board. An honor board is one where each member of our board has been certified by the Michigan Association of School Boards. We take many classes to continue our education, and I'm proud to say that as of this spring, we are an honor board. There are very few honor boards in the state of Michigan. Likewise, during that period of time, you've also heard what we've accomplished through the bond. That was through our community. They put the faith in this board to handle those dollars, and we did. We've done a lot of great things with this particular board, but while we've done a lot of good things, there's still a lot of things to do. And I want to continue to be on this board to see what we can accomplish in the future. So I ask you for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank the candidates who participated in tonight's forum, each of you trying for the 3 seats on the school board. We will now take a quick break to set up for the Wayne County Commission. And I'd personally like to thank all of you. We went through 13 questions. I think that's, a record. Thank you very much. You did very well.
Thank you.